Readings in Code Administration, Volume 1, History, Philosophy, Law. Part 3, Building Officials. Story 23, The Building Inspector, by Thomas H. McCaig, Consulting Architectural Engineer in Buffalo, New York. Reprinted from Boca News, March 1958, pages 1 and 3 through 5. The introductory paragraph reads, Field inspection is not taught in any college, and so must be learned the hard way, through experience. An experienced, observant inspector can prevent many construction accidents if he strictly enforces safety regulations and corrects situations not explicitly covered by formal rules. The inspector should also develop a friendly, cooperative relationship with the contractor to make his inspections more effective. Yet this relationship must be a professional one, so that he will not be suspected of collusion. Field inspection, whether by the clerk of the works or by the building inspector, is a subject colleges do not teach. The only way to learn it is the hard way. We learn very little from a job where everything goes along fine. We only learn when things go wrong or the unforeseen happens. The only school I know of where an inspector can get a good education is the School of Experience, and often the tuition is very high. As far as I know, the perfect job has never been built, and the building inspector knows this. As building inspectors, you may have a slightly different viewpoint than we do. You are on the outside looking in, and we are on the inside looking out. You are interested in safety and compliance with the law. We are interested in safety and compliance with the plans and specifications. You are primarily interested in the welfare of the general public. We are looking after the interests of the owner. But they are parallel fields, and we have much in common. The clerk of the works, or resident engineer, assumes the plans and specifications have been prepared by somebody else. The building inspector assumes the plans examiner has checked the plans. Both are only interested in seeing that the plans are carried out as drawn and approved. However, there is a difference in their positions. The building inspector has the full police power of the municipality behind him if he sees something he doesn't like. But if the clerk of the works sees the same thing and the specifications have left a loophole, he may face a claim for an extra. Even though he has the full power of the law behind his interpretations of the approved plans and the code, the building inspector should, for the best interests of the job, apply reasonable interpretations. The personality of the inspector is an important factor in the execution of the job. The building inspector can only visit the job at intervals, and if proper cooperation is not forthcoming, much bad workmanship can be done and covered up between his trips. The clerk of the works spends more time on the job than the building inspector, and a contractor who wants to hang a lot of things on the clerk of the works and get away with it. The inspector, whether he be the clerk of the works or a building inspector, is usually looked on by the contractor superintendent as a white-collar man, an unnecessary evil. It may take a long time to overcome this attitude, and with some contractors, you never can do it. But a fair and reasonable approach to the contractor's problems will go far in building a friendly, cooperative attitude. Believe me, your work can be much easier if that friendly cooperation exists. If the contractor tends to cheat, then by all means vary the pattern of your inspections. Do not let him get the idea that on Tuesday morning at 11:30 you will be there, and not before. There are few jobs that are built without changes. When a change order goes through, it becomes part of the job's contract documents. If the change can be done without any new drawings, chances are that the plans examiner or building inspector may never be informed. And yet, since a change could involve some code or safety requirements, the building inspector should be informed of all changes. It might be advisable for the inspector, on his regular visits, to walk around the job with the clerk of the works. Any inspector, whether building inspector or clerk of the works, should build up a library of reference materials. I don't mean a library of college textbooks, but of pamphlets of the kind put out by the Portland Cement Association and other trade associations. ASTM specifications are also helpful. Most lumber manufacturers' associations publish and distribute grade rules. Without spending much money, the inspector can build up a very satisfactory reference library. Despite the attitude of the general public or the press, it is a physical impossibility for the building inspector to give thorough inspection to the job. On many jobs, even a full-time clerk of the works cannot, and he has only one job to follow, while the building inspector has a number of them. Yet after every construction collapse or building accident where injuries and deaths occur, there is a hue and cry against the building inspector. Perhaps the owner was unwilling to pay for full-time supervision, and the only inspection the job got was the periodic inspection by the building inspector or the architect. The building inspector is in a particularly vulnerable position, so he must avoid any appearance of convening with the contractor. Under the circumstances, what can the building inspector do to best protect the public? He can at all times check for the observance of general safety rules. The Label Department of New York State, for example, has set definitive rules for using scaffolds and ladders. It is not a matter of judgment, for the rules are not set down in code. The ladder or scaffold either complies or it doesn't. Similarly, most municipalities have ordinances governing barricading streets, using streets or sidewalks for storing materials, marking hazards with red flags or lights, etc. Other situations, though not explicitly covered by safety regulations, can be corrected by an observant inspector. For example, collapses sometimes are caused by materials piled up so high that they overload the floor. If an inspector sees materials dangerously piled up, he should ask the architect or plan examiner what the design load for that floor is. Construction accidents are often caused by trench cave-ins. An inspector must determine if the sides need sheeting or shoring. Personally, I assume that unless experience has shown that the material being excavated will stand, it is best to shore it, even though the ASTM specification requires shoring if there is an indication that the sides may fail. Although the building inspector is not ordinarily interested in the sequence of work, there are certain sequences that are unsafe and should not be permitted. I recall several jobs where the steel was erected before the wall was brought up to the level for bearing plates, and the wall bearing ends of the beams were carried on shores until the wall was built. During another job, the plans showed the wall between a school cafeteria and corridor to be a 12-inch bearing wall with a 4-inch tile core and 4-inch glazed facing tile wainscoting on both sides. The glazed tile did not arrive on time, so the contractor laid up a 4-inch tile wall 7.5 feet high. On top, he carried a 12-inch tile wall to support a second floor and roof, and laid up the facing tile after the floor and roof were in place. It was no thanks to the contractor that nothing happened. Here are a couple of other field inspection tips that might be helpful. During winter concrete work, be sure that every reasonable precaution is taken in heating the concrete, whether in transit or field mixed, and in protecting it for a proper period of time after placing. If you believe an area is frozen, don't depend on a hammer test. Frozen concrete will give the same reaction as properly set concrete. Instead, find out if the concrete is frozen by trying to thaw it with a blowtorch or hot water. Also, if salamanders are used on the job, see that they are used in a safe way. Insist they be placed on a pile of sand instead of on the bare concrete slab. They should be away from concrete columns, walls, or flammable material. In a multi-story job, see that they are placed so high wind cannot blow them away. I recall a job where the pouring of the 8th floor was finished at 5 p.m., and by 11 p.m. a 60-mile-an-hour wind was blowing, and the temperature was 10 above and dropping rapidly. The wind first shredded the tarpaulins, then blew over the salamanders so that they rolled off the floor onto the street 7 stories below. The fire department had to be called. Although there was no fire damage, the slab froze.